on Belfast cemeteries, particularly on Balmoral, on Milltown, on City Cemetery. And he's also doing research into hidden burial grounds, which hopefully will bear fruit in the near future. Before I ask Tom to come to speak, just want to go through a few bits of housekeeping. You should all have been muted on entry, and that's because we don't want any distractions while Tom is speaking. If you have any questions or comments, please put those comments in chat. We don't mind you doing that during the course of the talk. And at the end of the talk, we'll invite Tom to respond to those questions. The other thing to note is we are recording you. So if you don't want your face appearing on the recording, please feel free to stop the video. Okay, so it's now my pleasure to ask Tom to come and tell us about the lost Presbyterian meeting houses of Belfast. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you very much. And it's great to be back in PRONI after a few years. And this is a great institution. And could I just pay homage to the staff here, who down the years of my research have been more than helpful. So it's important for me to be here today. And I want to talk about the lost Presbyterian meeting houses of Belfast. When you study the Presbyterians of the 19th and 20th century, one of the things that really strikes you is that they are prodigious builders. Now, I have counted about over 90 congregations in the history of Belfast. And those congregations in their time built over 135 churches. They were prodigious builders. And one of the beautiful things that I find about that is that they also built as many schools as they built churches or meeting houses. And in this talk, I use the term church and meeting house. They're interchangeable. Now, from about 1937, Presbyterian numbers in this city started to decline. And when we get into the 1960s, what you begin to see is an acceleration in the closure of these churches. And it strikes me that we are in danger of losing sight of the built heritage of the Presbyterian community, our Presbyterian built heritage. So it's important for me to try and explore and find out and research where these buildings were, and to give and to leave a sense of the power of that heritage. And so I'm very conscious of seeing these old meeting houses. And as I say there in my presentation, if we cannot physically see a congregation or its place of worship, historically, we become deaf to its narrative. So what I want to do today is to give you a sense of the extent, both of that heritage, but also the loss and what we're not seeing. From about 1964, 31 Presbyterian congregations in this city have closed their doors. 12 of those buildings have been demolished or lost, gone. And so we pass spaces in the city, and because we don't see the building, we don't see the story of that congregation. Presbyterians were instrumental in the building of the city. And when we lose sight of their meeting houses, we lose sight of their narrative. So I want to this is always the way it goes, but so it is. Oh yeah, thank you. That is just a reminder of what I call a senior moment. So you'll forgive me for that. So let me give you some backdrop. to the life of the Presbyterians in our city. So the very first Presbyterian chaplains in Belfast came with the Scottish Parliamentary Army, which was led by Major General Robert Monroe, and they constitute themselves as the first presbytery and hold their first meeting in Carrickfergus on the 10th of June, 1642. Now, Presbyterians were already in the town of Belfast, but they worshipped in the old Corporation Church in High Street. The first Belfast congregation was organised in July 1642 inside that army, and it was encamped at Stranmillis. So Presbyterians started to organise, and they organised in the hinterland of Belfast. So in Dundonald in 1645, Castlereagh in 1650, Carnmoney in 1654, Dunmurry in 1676, and Gilnahirk in 1759. So these are the first Presbyterian congregations in the vicinity of Belfast town. Now, the very first Presbyterian congregation was situated at the north gate of the ramparts. Now, so this is a map of Belfast from 1696. And one of the things that happens when you look at some of these old maps, they're put together, I think, many years after. And so the dates don't always match up, but nevertheless, let me explain this map to you. This is High Street, and these are the ramparts. So this today would be Castle Street leading to Divis Street and the Falls Road. So if you come along the ramparts, today this would be Lower North Street. And then if you come up, this would be the Shankill Road, and this is the Old Lodge Road, long since gone. So I want to draw your attention to, it says, the old church. And I believe this is where the very first Presbyterians met in Belfast. They then moved to Rosemary Lane, and the church there is called First Rosemary, and that was in 1695. George Bain suggests this original church in Rosemary Lane was rebuilt in 1717. And the existing meeting house, which we see here in this photograph, was built in 1783. It is a striking building. It's set in the very heart of Belfast. Second Rosemary was erected in 1707 on a site directly behind First Rosemary. In 1789, this original church was demolished and a new larger church built. On the 17th of January 1894, this congregation decided to move to a new church on Elmwood Avenue called All Souls. And the old church building was demolished in 1964 to make way for a car park. Now, this is a photograph of Second Rosemary, and it was there until 1964. It closed on the 11th of October 1896, and the building was demolished, as I said, in 1964. Now, this is a photograph of First Rosemary Choir taken in 1944. But what strikes me about the photograph is, if you look beyond the perimeter wall here, you still see Second Rosemary. It was still in existence. This is an actual photograph of a Second Rosemary. As I said, it was used up until 1964 and then demolished to make way for a car park. This is an earlier street plan of First and Second Rosemary. And you can, when you study the buildings, you can see that the shape of the architecture outline of the building is very different to what it is today. So this is First Rosemary, the earlier building, and behind it you have Second Rosemary. This is what it looks like, what it looked like in the 19th century. And this building, of course, anyone who knows First Rosemary will recognize this building. And you can see directly behind it was Second Rosemary. Now, Second Rosemary emerged out of First Rosemary congregation. When the congregation got too big, they decided to split it and build another meeting house. So there were 3 congregations in Rosemary Street. So here you have First Rosemary, then behind it you have Second Rosemary, and over there to its right you have Third Rosemary. Now, Third Rosemary emerged as a result of a dispute over doctrine in First and Second Rosemary. And this becomes a characteristic of many of the congregations, early congregations of Belfast. Third Rosemary, when it was built, was called the New Erection. It was built in 1721 as a result of a dispute, as I said, in First and Second Rosemary. It was demolished in 1830 and 1831, and a new church erected on the site in 1832. It was destroyed in the Blitz of 1941. After that, the congregation merged with a congregation called Aikenhead to form Rosemary Congregation. And Rosemary Congregation built a new church on the North Circular Road in Belfast in 1956. This is Third Rosemary, a photograph of it, a very imposing building. But I also want to draw your attention to the facade of the building. When I studied many of the old Presbyterian buildings in the city, it's quite obvious that a lot of them were designed along, in a sense, classical lines. And it struck me when I started to see this in these buildings, that I remember as a kid hearing someone talk about Belfast as the Athens of the North. And I suspect they got that name because of the classical nature of many of its buildings, including many of the old meeting houses. This is Third Rosemary after Blitz, and you can see it gives you a very good sense of the depth of the building, but it was completely destroyed during the Blitz and had to be demolished. Now, Barry Street, as a congregation that started in Belfast in the 1780s, it opened then. The original church was demolished and rebuilt in 1858 by a minister who's known in the history of this city as Hugh Hanna. And he built the Barry Street church that we know today. And its congregation ceased to exist after July 2016. Now, there were 4 congregations emerged out of Barry Street. And this becomes quite confusing at times when a congregation will move to another location and adopt a different name. So many Presbyterians will see their lineage come back to First and Second and Third Rosemary, but they will be, of course, a part of other congregations that evolved out of these early Belfast congregations. So this is Barry Street today, and as I said earlier, the last Presbyterian congregation to meet their closest stores in July 2016. Today it is occupied by an independent congregation. Donegal Street again merged as a result of a dispute in Second Rosemary in 1791. So those involved in the dispute built a new church in Donegal Street in 1792. This church, the original church, was demolished in the 1840s and rebuilt in 1843. And that church was demolished in July 1885. The congregation then moved to a new church in Clifton Park Avenue in March 1886, and that was renamed Cliftonville. And you can see, when one is outside of the Presbyterian family, it can be very confusing to track the origins of a church, because often the origins of a church and the origins of a congregation, it can be a bit of a puzzle to sort out in your mind what comes first. So I want to show you this map of Donegal Street in 1819. And here is the three Rosemary churches here. And this is Donegal Street here. And this is Donegal Street Presbyterian Church. Now, this is the original meeting house. But you can see by a study of the map that it is a circular building. And when you look at a later map of the 1840s, this is the church here, you can see how its design has changed. But also in this map, while I've got your attention, this is the Belfast Academy, the first big Presbyterian college in Belfast. This is a Baptist hall, which was bought by a Reverend John Edgar, and I'll talk about that later. So you begin to see, particularly in this area of North Belfast, as the city expands, and primarily it expands to the north and the west, what you begin to see, it's like a wave, the Presbyterians, as the city expands, this wave moves out of the city centre, and this wave of Presbyterians, they're building new schools, they're building new meeting houses, and it's quite extensive when you begin to study it. This is the second Donegal Street church, built in 1843. This was demolished in July 1885 to make way for the Royal Avenue and that area to be straightened, and there was a lot of development going on, and the congregation were forced to move to a new church at Clifton Park Avenue. I want to talk about this congregation here. This is called the Linenhall Street Covenanters, and they were formed in 1808. And in 1875, they moved to 42 Botanic Avenue. But here, this is the Covenanters here. Today, we would know this as the back of the BBC on Armour Avenue. And you can see the line here. This line of a street still exists. And this was a Covenanting congregation, as I said, formed in 1808. By the way, there is another, this is Linenhall Street Presbyterian congregation, formed in 1839. And over here, this is Alfred Street, but it started off as Alfred Place. And this was a church. This was a church in Alfred Place built by the Reverend John Edgar. And then he built another church. And John Edgar turns out to be one of the most dynamic Presbyterians of the 19th century. He was responsible for getting the ground where the Presbyterian College is situated today, a very dynamic man. So this congregation of Covenanters, they moved in 1875 to 42 Botanic Avenue. And this is it today. It was sold in the 1930s to the Irish Evangelical Church. It closed, I think, in 1971 because there was talk of big road development in the area, but that never happened. I think today it is a nightclub. This is Alfred Place. Now, this is Alfred Place here, or Alfred Street. So Alfred Place was the first church of John Edgar, and he opened that in 1822. Now, in Alfred Place, again, three congregations emerged out of that meeting house. And beside it is Alfred Street, again built by John Edgar. All gone now, disappeared. And it's just, you know, it really gives you a sense of the movement of Presbyterians out of the centre of Belfast, but also the loss in terms of our built heritage. As you can see here, this is the Covenanters in Linenhall Street, and this is another, as I said, Presbyterian church opened in 1839. This is Fisherwick Place, built in 1827 and demolished in 1901 to make way for the assembly rooms. So it was demolished in March, April 1901, and the congregation then moved to Fisherwick on the Malone Road. That congregation is still in existence. This is College Street South. We would know it today as the Grosvenor Road. And there is a reformed This is the old Hippodrome, and over across the road was the Ritz. Today is the Grosvenor Road here, but it was called College Street South. And this was the second Reformed congregation in Belfast. It opened in 1835, their meeting house. And this is a photograph of it. You'll see here 1833. This is when the congregation was formed. But this building was demolished in 1900 and replaced by this building, a new church, and they built it and they called it Chancellor Memorial. But in 1972, it was rendered unfit for use after a bomb explosion seriously damaged the building, and that congregation moved to the Dublin Road to be absorbed by the Dublin Road congregation. This Alfred Street, built by John Edgar in 1837 and closed in 1872. In fact, it was a premature closing because the congregation were building a new church in Fitzroy Avenue, but moved there in 1874. This building, we could still see it right up until the 1960s. And this is what it looked like. The whole frontage had been taken off, but here is the original Alfred Street Presbyterian church built by John Edgar. Sometimes it is very hard to find these old meeting houses, but when you look through, you can see them. Some of them were demolished, some of them are kept on for industrial purposes or shops, and one has to go looking to see their trace to find these old meeting houses. This is Linenhall Street, built in 1839. Again, it moved in 1887 due to development in the area, and the congregation moved to the Crescent. This church was demolished in the 1890s. And of course, the Crescent then closed in the 1970s. I want to talk about, this is York Street here. And you can see over here, this is Academy Street. There's a Baptist church. There's the Academy. There's the church in Donegal Street. This is a church that was formed by the Remonstrant Synod. We would know them today as non-subscribers. If you go along, this is another Presbyterian church, Great George's Street. This is where the revival in 1859 began in Belfast, and we're moving along, and this is another Presbyterian church, York Street. So you can see a concentration in North Belfast of Presbyterian meeting houses. This is York Street, photograph taken, which was destroyed in the Blitz in April 1941. And this is it after its bombing. As you can see, the building is in a really bad condition. It merged then with its neighbour Castleton congregation and was renamed Alexandria. This is College Square North, the new Secession Church of Scotland. After this was formed in 1840 over a dispute in Linenhall Street with the formation of the General Assembly, and members in the Linenhall Street who opposed to that went and built a new church. And you can see it just here, right on the corner of College Square North and Durham Street. This is Christ Church. This today is the library of Inst, and the church was here. And this is a photograph of it, closed in 1964, but demolished in 1966. And you begin to see a pattern now of what we have lost in our city, you know. And from this period on, the 1960s, you really see an acceleration of closures in the Presbyterian Church. This is York Street Remonstrant. So in the 1820s, there is a major schism in the Presbyterian Church, and it's over, one of its elements is dispute over the doctrine of Ionism. It's a dispute about the Trinity. And eventually a number of ministers leave and form the Remonstrant Synod. And so this church was, today we would know them as non-subscribers. And This was built in 1840. It was demolished and rebuilt in 1891 and destroyed in the Blitz of May 1941. So this is what it looked like after the Blitz. You can see it's just a shell of the building. This is Great George's Street. And if you look, this is Nelson Street, and this is Great George's Street here. And this is the church built by the Reverend Thomas Toy. And as I said, Great George's Street was the very first Presbyterian church in Belfast to respond to the revival, what they call the Great Revival of 1859. I couldn't find, a photograph of the church, but what I did find is this drawing. And this building lasted until 1977, although it was sold in 1895. But the congregation in 1895 moved to Duncairn Gardens and became McCrory Memorial. Now, sometimes you have to go looking for these old buildings. And so this is a photograph I found of the Great George's Street with a new frontage on it. That was from the Belfast Telegraph during the 1930s. But I want to show you this photograph. This is Great George's Street here. And if you look just here, you can still see the old church, the original church, again with the frontage on it. But why I love this photograph, because look at this. These are the gantries. These are the Titanic gantries, of course, that are long since gone. You can see them here. These were built, in the first decade of the 20th century to prepare for the building of the Titanic and the Olympic. You can still see it here. But as I said, this is Great George's Street. Look at the cars. You can nearly date the street by the cars. And here, still here, you have Thomas Toy's church. This is Albert Street, built in 1852, and it was occupied until 1971. Then congregation amalgamated and became Argyle Place on the Shankill Road, and was renamed West Kirk. That congregation is still in existence, and the building was destroyed in a fire in 1997. And of course, Albert Street sits at the junction of Divis Street and the Falls Road. It was one of the few remaining congregations still in existence in the 1970s, you might say, in nationalist West Belfast. It had a great hall, and sometimes we don't appreciate that the whole infrastructure of Presbyterianism wasn't just churches, it was schools and halls. And they were really, there was a very cohesive element to Presbyterian congregations. And I always think those congregations were really, you saw the ambition of this community in terms of it was involved in sport, it was involved in education. They were really a very cohesive approach that merged into broader society. And when you see the closures that take place in the 1960s onwards, I do think it begs the question, has it been replaced? And what are the effects of these closures on general society? This is Eglinton Street, and this congregation came from Academy Street. And here you see it. This is the Crumlin Road here, and here's Eglinton Street, and here's his church. And that congregation moved to Carsglen in 1938, but the building was lost during the Blitz. This is a newspaper photograph of Eglinton Street. Academy Street was, this was a Baptist hall. You can see it here, Baptist Meeting House, and it was acquired by John Edgar. And was closed. It opened in 1861 and was closed in 1876. And after that, the building was used by 3 Sabbath schools. But this, as a Presbyterian congregation, there were 3 congregations emerged from this small meeting house. And this is the only reminder of its existence that I can find. I want to talk about Clifton Street because I want to talk about the concentration of Presbyterianism in North Belfast, and you can see it here in this map. So this is Clifton Street here, and so this is Aikenhead congregation in North at the corner of North Queen Street, and there's Donegal Street. That's gone. Then if you come across into Clifton Street itself, there is Clifton Street Church. That is gone. There is a Reformed Presbyterian Church here. That is gone. There was a school here, which was also a domestic mission for the non-subscribers. That is gone. This is a Free Church of Scotland, Presbyterians. That is gone. Then what you have up here is this is St. Enoch's up here. That is gone. And over here, you have Eglinton Street. That is gone. All gone. And you can see in this one area, the concentration of, Presbyterian activity and life. Just want to draw, this is a Belfast Mercantile College. We know it as Belfast High School, of course. And here you have Clifton House. But if you look at this small area here and the concentration of Presbyterianism, and it is all gone today. This is a Belfast domestic mission on Regent Street. If I go back, Regent Street, this is Regent Street here. And that was destroyed in the Blitz of April 1941. That was opened in 1861. This is Clifton Street, opened in 1863. And again destroyed in the Blitz in April 1941. This is Aikenhead at the corner of North Queen Street and Donegal Street. It was closed in 1927 and sold to St. Patrick's Parish. The congregation then moved to North Circular Road. The building was only demolished in the 1980s. So right up until the 1980s, you could see this old Presbyterian meeting house. St. Enoch's, this was built by Hugh Hanna and destroyed in a malicious fire in 1985. Its congregation held a joint service with Dunkern. The congregational numbers were fallen, so it held joint services with Dunkern from the 4th of July 1981 and was amalgamated with Dunkern in January of 1992. But this old, this was one of the biggest Presbyterian churches in Belfast. It was, I said, burnt down in 1985. This is Sandy Row, Fountainville. If anyone out there has a photograph of this church, could they get it to me? Because I've hunted high and low to try and get an image. But this is you're coming down the bottom of the Lisburn Road, and here is Fountainville. And the church was here. It was opened in 1873. And destroyed in a fire on the 1st of January 1920. The congregation then merged with Donegal Road, and that congregation was renamed Richview. You can still see the school, which was at the back of the church, if you're driving along Fountainville Avenue there. But as I said, if anyone has an image, I'd appreciate if it could be sent to me. This is a newspaper photograph of the burnt out shell of Fountainville. It's the only image that I can find to present. This is Cliftonville, which of course this congregation came from Donegal Street, and it closed in February 1972 and demolished in the 1980s. I think for a time, Free Presbyterians used this building. The congregation after its closure moved to Ballyhenry. This is Agnes Street, demolished in the 1970s. Its last service was 1971. And this congregation united with its neighbour Bethany and was renamed Emmanuel. The United Free Presbyterian Church of Scotland, built in 1881 in Clifton Street, and destroyed, its congregation had dwindled, but it was destroyed in a malicious fire in 1985. So you begin to see how much we have lost of our Presbyterian built heritage in Belfast. I want to show this because this is Willowfield McQuiston Tin Church, built in 1892. And it was then sold to Ravenhill in 1898 and only demolished in 1957. So from this period on, from the 1890s on, many new congregations start to use old tin churches as a first step in their progress to building, say, a stone brick, church. So all of these have gone, and I think in Belfast there's only one tin church left, and it's on the Glen Road in West Belfast. But these were quite common from the 1890s onwards. This is Trinity Street Covenanters, built in 1896 and closed in 1975. It was bought by Belfast City Council, but it was demolished as a part of a redevelopment scheme in 1983. Old Park, which is quite modern, was closed in September 2007 and demolished in October 2008. The congregation emerged with a manual. So this fine church has been lost to us. And, just to go back to where I started, if we can't see it, we can't hear it. We can't hear the history of this congregation because people drive past that site every day and have no realization that Presbyterian congregation worked hard on that site. This is Dunlop Memorial on Serpentine Road, opened in 1955 and amalgamated with Glengormley in 1999. It was demolished in 2000. So this process isn't just a process of old meeting houses. It comes right into the present. This is Henry Taggart Memorial Hall, built in 1957 as an extension of Nelson Memorial on the Shankill Road. And of course, it's sat between Ballymurphy and New Barnsley, and we would call it an interface today. And was closed on the 15th of November 1970, and it was demolished in the 1990s. At one point, it was a British Army base. This is Suffolk, built in 1958, badly damaged in a malicious fire in 1993, and the building sold in 1994 and later demolished. So when we are talking about our built heritage, it comes right to us to this day. So, and this gives a sense, this slide gives you a sense of what has been taking place within Presbyterian congregations in Belfast, particularly since 1964. Between 1964 and today, 31 Belfast Presbyterian churches have closed. Now, often their congregation, that's not the end of a congregation. They could be assimilated with another congregation, or they merge, and create a new congregation. But that is a striking number of churches, I think, that have been closed. 13 in the 1960s and 70s, 3 in the 1980s, 4 in the 1990s, and 11 since 2000. And I think, there's going to be another one added to that, because Townsend Street, I suspect, is very near closing. So these are churches lost to our view: Agnes Street, Albert Street, Cliffville, College Square North, Grosvenor Road, Chancellor Memorial, Dunlop Memorial, Old Park, Trinity Street, St Enoch's, Suffolk, Henry Taggart, and United Free Church of Scotland. They've all been either demolished or, in some cases, vandalized and burnt, but they're all gone. And that's 12 congregations that we can't see, and if we can't see them, we can't hear them. These are churches that have closed their doors. There's Balmoral, and this often strikes me as this is a very historic church. First Balmoral in September 1912, before the signing of the covenant, Carson went to a service in this church, and the minister of this church gave the sermon in the Ulster Hall that afternoon in late September 1912. Botanic Avenue is closed. 42, of course, there's another Presbyterian establishment at the beginning of Botanic Avenue. Barry Street, Broadway, which today is, of course, Culturland. Crumlin Road, closed in 2018. The Crescent, Donegal Pass, which has recently been in the news because of an act of vandalism, because it was made into a multicultural centre and was burned. Dunkern, Elmwood, a very important Elmwood Presbyterian Church opposite Queen's, was bought by Queen's University, and today it's known as Elmwood Hall. Fort William and McCrory on the Antrim Road. Then Dunkern, St. Enoch's Hopelink, the Hopelink Centre is still there. Jocelyn Avenue, that's Evangelical Presbyterians. McCrory Memorial, McGean Memorial on the Lower Newtonards Road, Nelson Memorial on the Shankill Road, Ulsterville on the Lisburn Road, Seymour Hill, again Evangelical Presbyterians, Shankill Road Mission, and Windsor was the last to be closed. That was on January 2022. But maybe if you look at, for instance, if you look at the, North and West Belfast, so Agnes Street, Albert Street, Cliftonville, say College Square North, which is on the Grosvenor Road, Dunlop Memorial, Old Park, Trinity Street, St. Enoch's, Henry Taggart, United Free Presbyterian Church of Scotland, Barry Street, Broadway, Crumlin Road, Donegal Pass, so these are all Dunkern, St. Enoch's, McCrory Memorial, Nelson Memorial, Shankill Road Mission, all in West and North Belfast. So you can see there is something very critical that's happened to Presbyterian congregations in that area. So what I've tried to do is give you a sense of the extent of change in Presbyterianism. And it has particularly suffered, I think, since the 1960s. Redevelopment, conflict, the younger people moving out and say going to their education in Britain and not coming back. A whole variety of reasons, modernity, people dropping off. And in a sense, that momentum, what you see in 19th century Belfast of Presbyterians moving to the perimeter of the city is still going on today. But Belfast as a Presbyterian city has long since stopped being a Presbyterian city. And you can see that in the movement of congregations. And I think we have to be particularly conscious today of the need to remind ourselves and to hang on to that powerful history, which is so much a part of the city of Belfast. And I just threw up a copy of my Balmoral Cemetery because Stephen has already mentioned it. But if you're looking for more information on the congregations of Belfast, you'll find it in this book. So thank you very much. And I hope that gives you some sight into the life of Presbyterian built heritage in our city.